Everyone, it's John from What Up, and welcome back to another video. And this is going to be my episode breakdown for Season 2, Episode 2 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show. We're going to go through the episode scene by scene. We'll talk about the scene, what's going on there, explain a couple of things in relation to the books. But basically, this is the one you want to watch if you haven't already read the books. It gives a wider concept of what's going on behind the scenes and how things interact in the show. So, if you're new to the channel, you don't know what we do here, we cover Wheel of Time show news, pretty much anything and everything related to the Wheel of Time. That's what we talk about here. So if you like that sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Of course, click that like button. I'm doing reviews, episode breakdowns, and Easter egg videos for every single episode of Season 2. We're continuing to cover the news and any leaks that may come out, and then after Season 2 is done, I have a ton of Season 3 leaks stockpiled for you folks, and we're going to release those afterwards, so make sure you subscribe because you don't want to miss any of this stuff coming up. Now, because we're walking through the episode, we're talking about it, we're explaining things, basically I'm just kind of doing a commentary on the scenes, I do have to give a fairly hefty spoiler warning because we're going to talk about elements of the books all the way up to the end. So, spoiler warning, if you have not seen the first season of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show, that's episodes 1 through 8, or both episodes 1 and 2 of Season 2, and have not read the Wheel of Time books, that's the Eye of the World all the way up through A Memory of Light, books 1 to 14 by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, be forewarned, I'm going to ruin plot points and character arcs from both of those mediums. That being said, let's get on to the breakdown. Right in the cold open, we see Rand sitting on the ground, covered in blood. He has a bloody sword, all of his friends are dead, all over the place, all around him, and the scene ends with Ashamael essentially kind of laughing and just going off into nothingness. We've seen this a number of different times. So the first season, during the entire first season, they used dreams to portray a lot of different things. Now, in the book series, dreams were very important. There was a world of dreams where they interact with people, and they also had a lot of dreams forced on them by the Forsaken. This looks to be more of that, and we'll probably see more and more of that in the second season. But this is real important because this goes right to Rand's mental state. In the book series, he tried to push away anyone who was close to him or who was getting close to him because he feared for their safety. And anytime somebody actually did get close to him, generally things would happen to them that he would blame himself for. So not only is this one of those dreams sent to him by Ashamael, I think it's also just to kind of push him a little bit closer to the edge. Because in the book series, you have to remember, his state of mind was a good part of whether the dark would win or lose as we progress through the book series. So I think we're going to see more and more of this, especially considering the facts that we see a lot of shots in the sanatorium in this episode. They're going to play up mental health issues and things that are going on, I think, a lot more heavily in the show and probably in more depth, update it, modernize it just a little bit compared to what it was in the books. And that could be a theme they really, really lean on. Next up, we have Maureen Lan along with Delius and Varan, and this is after the Fade attack in episode 1. They are very weak, they are despondent, and Moraine is just as unpleasant, I guess you should say, as ever. She spends a lot of time in these episodes pushing people away that are close to her, much like Rand does. So I think they're trying to parallel their two stories, but in very different ways. Rand's scared he's going to hurt people because people are looking for him. He's the dragon. He has all of this power, and of course, anyone close to him is also a target. Moraine, on the other hand, just feels like she doesn't deserve anyone close to her right now because of what's going on, especially Lan. She's lost connection to the true source, the one power, and she can't actually channel anymore, so she's kind of taking it out on Lan. Now, I want to talk about the scene a little bit because they're very weak for the first little bit of this episode, very despondent, very kind of, sitting around, not doing too much, and it's because they just got healed. In the book series, a lot of the energy and effort from healing comes from within the person itself. So if you're healed, whether it's a cold, whether it's a cut, whether it's an infection, you're going to feel weak afterwards, and this is really a really great callback to that in the scene. Next, we cut to Perrin, and him and the Shinarians, along with Loial, are investigating sort of an empty town along the River Errol. Now, this is a scene almost taken word for word from the book series with some major changes at the same time, which is kind of interesting. So basically, this mirrors a scene in the books where Rand kind of comes into this house where they had seen a lady from the street in the window, which was seen in this particular scene. And then he got caught in a time trap and kept seeing visions over and over again. Now, this was one of those things where they never really talked about it much afterwards or showcased it again. And after Rand kind of snapped out of it and came out of it, everything in the room was covered in flies. There was flies everywhere during his sort of entrapment. And they did that pretty well in the scene. They're doing it a bit different, though. So I've talked about this in a couple of other one of my videos. I think they're merging Sniffers and Wolf Brothers into one entity in the show, which is kind of smart because they have similar characteristics. And let's face it, Sniffers really weren't that useful and weren't used a whole lot throughout the book series, just a couple of times here and there, and they can be very easily replaced by Wolf Brothers. Essentially, Sniffer can smell violence, smell what's been done, smell violence that has happened before, and differentiate what it was. Everything from a broken arm to a bar fight to domestic violence, they can kind of tell the difference. And it wasn't really described if they could see it word for word or not, but they can definitely tell what it was. So what we're seeing here from Perrin as he comes along places where there were violence, it seems like he's almost smelling what has happened. So I think in addition to his heightened senses, the ability to talk with wolves, the ability to send and talk to other wolf brothers, and we're also going to see the abilities of Sniffer kind of rolled into Perrin here. And of course, this scene kind of cuts to a bunch of flies at the end of it. Perrin snaps out of it. So instead of a time trap that Rand was in, we have Perrin in the visions of being a Sniffer, and then he kind of snaps back to reality. So mirrors that scene in chapter 10 of The Great Hunt. Really cool look for the show. And of course, I have to talk about this scene where they find the Fade nailed to the barn door. This was a really iconic scene within The Great Hunt. It was one of those things where no one really knew if we would see it in the show. However, we all really hoped we would. Essentially, it showcases Fane's power. So in the book series, Fane was traveling with dark friends with the Horn of Valir and the dagger inside one of those really cool boxes that you've seen in some of the promotional material that the Horn is still in. We've seen it in the first season, episode 8 as well. Sort of a small box. He wasn't in charge though. Like he was sort of fighting for power with the Dark Friends, the Fades, the Trollocs. He wasn't the main dude sort of running this until, of course, this happened. He just got tired of it, decided to peg a Fade to a barn door, and at that point, everyone just sort of fell in line, including the Dark Friends, who all mostly got eaten during the travels. He just fed them to the Trollocs. So we haven't seen any of that so far in the show, but this here is sort of hinting at that from the books, and it just showcases Fane's power going forward. And I think we're going to see kind of a supercharged Fane in the series versus the books. At least I hope so anyway. All right, in this next scene, we get to meet Errol for the first time, and Errol is a fan favorite. People love him. They love him to pieces so far. He's been the talk of a number of different parts of the fandom on social media, but this scene is important for a number of different reasons. The first thing is it gives us an insight into Rand's mental health. He's actually concerned about people that have mental health issues right now because he knows he himself has been affected by the taint. So that's kind of neat. But Errol was a smart bet from the showrunner's perspective and the writer's perspective because Rand never learned the sword in the first season. In the book series, he spent a lot of time with Lan, learned the sword a little bit, and then in that sort of time jump between the end of the Eye of the World and the beginning of the Great Hunt, he'd been working with Lan almost daily, working on his sword forms, and at that point, he wasn't quite a blade master, but Lan had remarked a number of times that if he worked with him for some time longer, he would be. And Lan is pretty sparing with his praise, so Rand thought that he was close. They're talking about Errol being a blade master, and Rand is bringing his sword in to do sword forms with him. So this is sort of the same thing. Rand is instead learning from Errol rather than Lan, and we get to see a few different little tidbits in this room. I've covered in my Easter egg video, like the Aiel buckler, the scout and the cavalry warhorse on his bedside table. Errol was a member of the Kyrian army during the Aiel War and fought the Aiel. He's also scared of Rand because Rand looks an awful lot like an Aiel. So there's all of these things that are just laying the legwork for things that are going to happen much later on in the second season. So I think we're going to see Aiel at some point or another. Avienda, Bane, Shead, a few other people. We're going to also learn a little bit about their culture, and Rand will have to at some point or another fight High Lord Turok. So he has to have some sort of blade skills, and he's learning them from Errol here, which is kind of neat. Next, we jump to Nynaeve in the White Tower along with Leandra, and Leandra takes Nynaeve in under her wing just a little bit here, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But this scene is reminiscent of something that happened in the book series. So when Nynaeve first was young and starting to learn to channel, whether she wanted to or not because she had the spark, she was watching over Egwene. Now, Egwene had breakbone fever. While Egwene had breakbone fever, she sort of thought that she was going to die, and the wisdom at the time had left her alone with her a few times, and she always thought that at some point or another, Nynaeve had given something to Egwene to make her feel better, when in fact, she never really did. She just used the one power to make her better without even realizing she was doing it. She was angry at the fact that she had breakbone fever, and that kind of translated into her channeling and healing her. So this is sort of the same thing. We're seeing a young girl here with breakbone fever. Nynaeve doesn't channel to heal her, but one of the members of the Yellow Asha does, and they use a very simplistic weave, something that Nynaeve would scoff at much later on in the book series because she's so adept at healing. But all of this, combined with the fact that Leandra seems to be caring more about Nynaeve's well-being than you would expect from a Red, especially, it's not really too big of a stretch. Nynaeve is the most powerful channeler known to the White Tower in years, and it would make total sense that not only would a Red, but a member of the Black Asha try to recruit Nynaeve to work for her and be around her, because that could be a major win for both the Reds or the Black if Nynaeve ends up joining either of those factions. All right, next up, we get our first glimpse of Sierra Coveney as Elaine Tricand. And in my opinion, they couldn't have picked a better actress to portray this character because she gets the character spot on. Now, in the book series, Egwene and Elaine meet in the tower. They bond over a bunch of different stuff. They bond over the fact that Egwene is Elaine's subject. They also bond over the fact that they both know Rand al'Thor. They've cut that part out of it because Elaine hasn't met Rand al'Thor yet, and I think that's honestly a little bit better. I'd rather them bond over other things and actually become friends than have Rand involved in every single little plot line or offshoot in the show. That can become a bit tiresome. But either way, they talk a bit here, they get introduced, and then you get to see Elaine's character just a little bit. She's a meeting with the Mistress of the Novices later on in the episode, and she actually is given punishment for the fact that a bunch of things were moved into her apartments. The Sheriam Sedai wanted the name of the person who did it, and Elaine wouldn't give the name up, so she's not going to get someone who's doing her mother a favor in trouble. In fact, she took the punishment instead. Really very neat and a very cool nod to her character's sense of justice, because I think there's a lot of character traits here that they portrayed in the very short time that Elaine had on the screen in this episode that really go to the core of the motivations of Elaine in the books. This scene here between Moraine and Varan is incredibly important. This is where Varan basically realizes or tells Moraine that she knows about the dragon. She knows all about Rand. She knows what's going on. She knows what Moraine's mission has been for years. And this was something that did happen in the books, and Moraine didn't totally trust Varan a whole lot, and in fact actually warned other people in the book series not to trust her too much because she seemed to know just a little too much. But we have to accelerate all of the plot lines a whole lot for the show because, like we said earlier, Rafe Judkins may only have 8 seasons to do this in, so they're kind of compressing things. This is Varan basically boldly stating she knows what's going on, and she's not quite joining Moraine on her journey, but she's going to start integrating herself a little bit more into the group. Also, the fact that she took over as Vandene, at least we believe she has, Adelia's sister, goes to the fact that she's done a lot of research on the subject, and it makes sense that she would know these things and try to assist Moraine in her journey to help the Dragon Reborn. Either way, a really nice scene between the two of them, showing Varan's motivations. And let's just face it, I think Varan's scene, one of Varan's scenes, is going to be the most watched scene in the entire Wheel of Time before the series ends. And that's all I'll say about that, even though I give full book spoilers, but I can't wait to see that on screen. All right, next up we have Rand. He's going through the Foregate in Cairhien at night, and he comes across the horrible co-worker that he had that seemed to delight in causing pain to the patients, especially Errol. Rand sort of loses control at this point and just attacks him, and while he's attacking him, he uses the one power unconsciously, and it scares him. This whole scene where Rand is chasing him throughout the night, where he fights him, where he gets him on the ground, and the only thing that stops him is realizing that he is unconsciously channeling as he's doing it, really sort of shows Rand's state of mind. Is this calculated? 100%. I believe so. I think Rand did this on purpose so he could get access to Logain and talk about the one power, and it's actually mentioned much later on when he has his meeting with Logain. But at the time, I think it's one of those things Rand couldn't control himself either. I don't think he meant to go as far as he did, and he's losing himself just a little bit. And that happens a lot in the books. Rand gets very, very dark for quite some time before he comes out the tunnel at the other end, so to speak, back into the light. And I think they're accelerating that. And I think we're going to see Darth Rand, as he's affectionately called within the fandom, very, very much earlier than we did in the book series. And I'm kind of thinking he's going to be even darker than he was there too, because let's face it, it would look really good on screen and be a great plot point to showcase to the fans of the show about how horrible he is and how things under his rule may be not any better than under the rule of the Dark One, which is sort of one of the themes of the series. Now we get something that didn't happen in the books, and I, for one, am happy they included it. Basically, we see Leandra ministering it to a man in a whole lot of pain. This scene itself was very hard to watch. She's trying to ease his pain, which is uncharacteristic for a Red. Not all Reds hate men, however, a good portion of the book series do, so it's one of their defining traits, so to speak. This is Leandra being affectionate, being loving, being worried about this individual. When Nynaeve tries to help, she's incredibly embarrassed and lashes out at Nynaeve for even seeing what's going on. Find out later on she's calling him my boy. I assume, and one can only assume, this is Leandra's child. Not many Aes Sedai have children or families because they live so long, and it's something they mentioned earlier, that Aes Sedai live for hundreds of years. And because of that, everyone in their life kind of withers away and dies, and they only have other Aes Sedai sisters that age the same as them around them. This being her child makes total sense, and it gives Leandra that human side that she didn't really have in the books. Let's face it, a lot of the Dark Friends, the Forsaken, and even some of the named Shadow Spawn will say we didn't really care for their motivations because we didn't know them. We didn't see them as characters. They were just the flavor of the weak villain. Leandra was much the same in the book series. There was some talk of her backstory about why she turned to the dark, but not a whole lot. This here, I think they're going to showcase this as a much better way to see the human side of her and maybe why she turned to the Dark One rather than staying in the light, because maybe she's been promised some help with her family as well, or perhaps her family would live. That would be an incredible motivation for someone to turn to the dark, in my opinion, and this makes Leandra's character a lot more human in my eyes than she was in the book series. The next scene I want to talk about is Maureen and Lan near the end of the episode, and this was Moraine is basically telling Lan that they're not equals and telling Lan to go away. A lot of people have said online that this is proof of the fact that Moraine has been stilled and has not been shielded, because she would never say such a thing, because she 100% sees them as equals throughout most of the book series, and during the show, that's only what she's seen so far. I think she's still telling the truth here. I think at this point she's saying that Lan is above her because she feels so downtrodden, so upset, and so useless because she doesn't have the one power. Remember, one power to most Aes Sedai and most channelers is everything. It defines their being. So if Moraine doesn't have access to it, and the way she's been acting throughout this season so far, both in episode 1 and 2, showcases the fact that she's incredibly upset, she's depressed, she doesn't know what to do with herself, and she is not near as put together as she normally is. All that stoic, bravery and whatnot is all gone. She's completely unsure of herself. She doesn't know what to do anymore. So when she says that line, we're no longer equals, or we are not equal, I think she means that she's placing herself below Lan. She's not lying at this point. I think she's still bound by the 3 oaths, because so far she hasn't outright lied at all, but she's done a lot of that Aes Sedai tricky truthfulness. Either way, at this point in the scene, she's pushing Lan away, and she's giving him to Alanna, so to speak, so Alanna can take care of him. And I said it in my Easter egg video, I believe that Alanna is going to take the place of Miriel, who is another green Asha, a green sister rather, in the book series, who specialized in taking broken warders who lost their Aes Sedai. She would rebond them and bring them back from the brink of death, and she also had incredibly intimate relationships with her warders, which was part of bringing them back. Alanna seems to have a lot of the same traits as Miriel, and I think that she's going to take over for that character in this respect. Then in the final battle in this episode, we see the Shienarans battling the Seanchan. Poor Loial gets roped up, and they eventually release him, and he just goes crazy. This is probably one of my favorite battles we've seen so far in any of the episodes, because it showcases a bunch of different things. The professionalism of the Shienarans. At one point or another, Maesma is shirtless. He's woken up from a dead sleep. He's fighting a bunch of Seanchan soldiers. He's winning, but he doesn't run outside right away. He stops. He puts on his armor, and then he goes out, because he knows that as a soldier, without his armor, he's more vulnerable. He's not a regular person. In this, you get to see the Seanchan fight for the first time, and you also get to see the Damane as well as the Suldam, and they are absolutely horrifyingly frightening. They take on everyone and win just themselves. I don't even know why they sent the soldiers in at first, But this fight scene where you get to see Loial being fierce and actually fighting, this accelerates his character's plotline a ton. He does not really fight a whole lot in the book series at all. Now, in this one where he's fighting the Shan-Chan, you can see where he's put the long handle on his axe, so to speak. He's being hasty, which is not something Ogier are known for. They're very docile, very slow, slow to come to conclusions, slow to come to the way they do things, mainly because they're scared of how other people perceive them. They don't want to seem hasty. They don't want to seem frightening to the humans and other people around them. So they make and take their time, kind of like the Ents, so to speak, in Lord of the Rings. I'm pretty sure a lot of the traits come from them. Either way, we get to see him go absolutely bananas here, which is really cool. He goes Super Saiyan and just takes out a bunch of Shan-Chan soldiers, breaks walls, throws people through boats. It's a treat to see. I can't wait to see more of Loial fighting. And in that aspect, I also want to see the Shan-Chan Gardeners fight, because they're all Ogier as well. And I think a battle with a bunch of them would be a treat to see on the screen. All right, folks, so that's my breakdown of Season 2, Episode 2. I went through most of the episode. There were a couple of scenes, of course, I left out because they were smaller and they didn't require as much explanation as others. But if you like this sort of thing, if you like my commentary throughout the episodes, if you like kind of the synopsis as we're talking and things that are going on compared to the books as well as what may happen later on, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm doing reviews, Easter egg videos, and breakdowns for all of the episodes for Season 2. I'm still keeping up with all the news as well, so you'll see news videos from me over the next couple of weeks. We're going to dive into Season 3 leaks right after Season 2 is done. This is the Wheel of Time channel. If you're going to subscribe to one channel, make sure it's this one. We cover everything we possibly can here, and I'm having a whole lot of fun doing it. So I want to thank you all very much for sticking with me here to the very end. Here's to many more.